Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the new strong and weak picks for patch 9.11. And I did just add two new challenges to my page on Icon, a KDA challenge and a CS per minute challenge. So if those are two things that you're struggling with in solo queue, if you're having a hard time getting your CS per minute up or keeping your KDA higher, then I definitely recommend taking a look at those challenges. There's going to be RP prizes as well, so link will be down in the description below. So to start it off here, probably the most significant changes for 9.11 is to Karthus. His ultimate's base damage along with his AP ratio are both being nerfed for this patch. So 50 base damage decrease and then 10% AP ratio decrease. Now you have to keep in mind that 50 base damage, it might not seem like a lot if it's just like on one target, but you have to remember that's 50 base damage on 5 enemy members. So that's technically a 250 damage decrease there, which is actually quite substantial. And then a 10% decrease on the AP ratio as well, which means like 10% decrease there to 5 members of the enemy team, which is actually quite a lot. So I do think this is going to drop Karthus from S tier down into A tier for this patch. And then for Master Yi, another jungler getting nerfed here for 9.11, so his attack speed is being lowered from 0.733 down to 0.679. His Q is also being nerfed to where the repeat strike damage is being lowered from 25% down to 15%, so a 10% damage nerf there. I do think that for the majority of elos, this does drop Master Yi down into A tier. For the lower elos, like Master Yi, he still might remain S tier for next patch, but in this patch right now, I would say that he's just like holding on to S tier. He's like a low S tier pick in this patch now, and I think that with these changes it should be enough to tip him down into A tier. Now there's a bunch of different changes for Galio here. Now obviously these are more so targeted towards the support Galio that we're seeing right now being played a lot in the pro scene. He's getting a base damage decrease on his W, but the AP ratio on it is being increased. Now the AP ratio buff here, it doesn't really come into effect until you reach 100 AP on Galio. So if you're playing Galio support, this is a straight up nerf. If you're playing mid lane Galio, then you'd need at least like you need 1.5 AP items probably for this to actually end up being a buff on Galio. So this also does hurt mid lane Galio throughout the early game and throughout a little bit of the mid game. So I just think overall these changes are pretty bad for Galio in both the support role and the mid lane, and I just don't think he's going to jump up for next patch. And then to put the nail in the coffin, Galio's E damage is being nerfed by 20 base at rank 1 there, so this does negatively impact both support and mid lane Galio, but I just think that for mid lane Galio players right now, it feels kind of bad because these nerfs here are more so targeted to support Galio, but they're also going to negatively affect mid lane Galio. And then for Akali here, getting nerfed for similar reasons as to why Galio was being nerfed. This champion is just way too strong in the pro scene right now, and it just sucks for solo queue Akali players because right now she's sitting at a 43% win rate in solo queue. It gets even worse, I'm pretty sure, the lower elo you go right now, so she's just not really a champion you want to be picking up. But I just don't know what they're going to do with this champion, because if this champion can have that low of a win rate in solo queue and still be picked in pro play, I feel like a champion does have some flaws and there needs to be something changed in her kit there. It's kind of similar to like Ryze and Azir, to where they're always going to be good in the pro scene, but they're pretty underwhelming in solo queue. So sucks for Akali players in solo queue, but passive energy there, the restoration, it is being lowered for next patch. Passive AP and AD are also being lowered by quite a substantial amount there, so actually some pretty solid Akali nerfs for next patch, and I do think she's just going to be staying down in the C tier for another patch. So for Gragas in this patch here, he's getting a bunch of different changes to his base stats. So base HP being increased, HP per level being increased, and then his base AD is also being increased. So I do think these changes should bump Gragas up at least into viability for solo queue. This is a champion that's been pretty weak in solo queue for the past, I'd say past couple of months now. So with these changes here, pretty good changes to his base stats, I do think he's going to jump up into A tier and just be a solid jungler for 9.11. So for Janna for this patch, she's getting a bunch of different changes here, and I think these changes are trending in the right direction. With these changes here, Janna should have more skill expression now for 9.11, so players that actually spend the time or put the time into this champion should be rewarded a lot more. I'm not too sure where she's going to land on the tier list because I do feel like she gets a little bit more difficult with these changes. However, I do think that if you can execute on the changes, it should be good for next patch. So W damage there is being lowered, cooldown is is also being lowered, but the big changes here are to her E, to where the shield is being increased by 10 at all ranks there. The cooldown is being changed, so it's being lowered a little bit in the earlier ranks, but it's being increased at the later ranks. And this is probably the bigger change here out of all of them. Each of Janna's abilities that slows or knocks up an enemy is now going to reduce her E's cooldown by 20%. So if you're able to hit like a multi-man Q in a team fight with Janna, your E's cooldown is going to be decreased by like 40% potentially if you had 2 members, 60% if you had 3 members. So if you can actually like use your Q effectively in team fights, hit multiple members with that, and in the laning phase as well, if you can hit multiple members with that, then you are going to be rewarded with a lower cooldown on your E's. So I do think that overall, it does mean that for your average Janna player, she should get weaker for next patch, but for your Janna player that does put the time into the champion, can actually hit her Q consistently, then I do think these are going to be positive changes. So Jace getting hit with a nerf to his Q for 9.11, and like the Akali and the Galio changes, these are changes targeted towards the pro scene. So right now in solo queue, I'd say Jace is a pretty average pick. He's like around A or B tier in solo queue. So with this change here, Q damage being lowered for next patch, it's being lowered there by quite a substantial amount once you do max it out, and this is the ability you max out first on Jace. So with this change, I do think he's going to drop from A tier down into B tier for 9.11. Now for Rammus for next patch here, his ultimate's damage is being changed, so it's being decreased, the base damage, by 10 at rank 1, 20 at rank 2, and then by 30 at rank 3. Now you do have to keep in mind that this is actually more than just 10 damage at rank 1 there, because it lasts for 8 seconds. Technically, this is an 80 damage decrease if you're using your ultimate for the full duration on the target you're hitting. So this is actually a little bit bigger of a change than I think it might look. And even though I do have Rammus staying S tier there on the overlay on screen, I think this could drop him down into A tier. It's hard to say. Right now, he's like a very strong pick in solo queue, so I think these nerfs are definitely warranted, but he's either going to stay like an S tier, low S tier pick for next patch, or he is going to drop down into A tier. And then for Warwick, kind of a forgotten champion, I feel like right now. I don't think he's terrible in solo queue. I'd say he's a pretty decent A tier pick, but he's getting buffed in this patch here, which should make people realize that this champion isn't actually all that bad. So his Q's healing is being increased there by 20% once you max it out, which is actually quite significant since you do max this ability out first on Warwick. So I don't think it's going to be enough to jump him up into S tier, but I do think that with these other junglers being nerfed in this patch as well here, with Karthus, Yi, Rammus being nerfed, it indirectly makes some of these champions in the jungle stronger, and with Warwick getting this direct buff as well, it's definitely going to help him out, so he should be at least like a very solid A tier for 9.11. Now these last two changes here, I did leave them for last because I'm not too sure if they are going to be hitting live for this patch. There's a bunch of different changes right now on the PvE that are not going to be hitting live in this patch, but they're being tested right now, like to Wukong, Teemo, Diana. Those changes aren't going to be coming though this patch, and I'm not too sure if the Malphite changes are going to be hitting live in 9.11, but they were on the PB last patch, so I kind of assume they should be hitting live now in this patch. So his Q's movement speed there, it is being increased. The Q's speed duration is being reduced though, so a little bit of a power shift there. And then his W is getting some changes, so the ratio, the armor and the AP ratio is being decreased, but he's now going to have an auto attack reset on the W, which is just really good. It's going to help him out like CS under tower a lot better. It's going to help him out in trade. So I think overall these changes should be pretty neutral for Malphite if they do go to live, and he should stay an A tier top laner. And then for Zack, I'm also not 100% sure if these changes do go live for 9.11 here, but we're going to go over them anyways just in case they do. So his Q, the cooldown is being changed, being increased at the earlier ranks, going to be the same when you max it out. W, the damage is being decreased by 2% of the target's max HP per 100 ability power, and his ultimate is being reverted. So I'm not really sure how this is going to shift Zack's power if these changes do go to live, because his Q and W are both being nerfed, but his ultimate is being reverted. So is his ultimate being reverted technically a buff? Because if it's not, then these are technically nerfs to Zack if these changes do go to live. So I do think overall most Zack players do like the fact his ultimate is being reverted. I think it's going to be a little bit more easier to use now. It's going to be a lot more consistent. So I do think that overall the ult change should be a buff to him, but I'd say he's going to stay like around a B/A tier pick if these changes do make it to live. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. Not a ton of changes for 9.11 here, so don't expect a super big shift in the meta for this patch. But with that being said, if you guys did enjoy this video, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.